Welcome to 5% Radio, where it's all about learning like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Please be sure to share and subscribe. Hello and welcome back to another episode of 5% Radio. Today is episode number 22, and I want to talk about writing a new story. So I'm currently going through this book, and when this book came out, it was a pretty big deal, but it's called The Miracle Morning by Elrod. I would highly recommend it if you've not read the book. I'll put a link in the description for like the Amazon Kindle version or something along those lines, whatever I can grab. But if you are not a reader, first of all, let me pause here and say this. If you're not a reader and you would like to reach your goals, you need to become a reader. If you want to reach your goals in any area of life, you need to become a reader because you are the average of the top 5 people you associate with the most. And if the people that you're currently associating with are writing a story into your life, so to speak, that is going to continually get the exact same results, then you need to find new association. Now, the chances that you're going to be able to find association with people that are actually currently getting the results that you want in the areas of, let's say, your marriage, your finances, your health, whatever else, the chances are slim unless you're going to go start, searching for people that have those results and begging to hang out with them, which if they have phenomenal results and you have terrible results, they may not really have a reason per se to hang out with you. However, the beauty of reading is that I can go associate with people that are worth millions of dollars, that have counseled thousands of marriages, that have exactly what I want in the specific areas that I'm looking to grow, and I can associate with their thinking by reading the things that they've written and learning what they've taught. So that is the beauty of reading. So if you are not a reader, I'll get off my soapbox, but if you're not a reader and you want to reach your goals, then you need to become a reader. And if you don't become a reader and you say you want to reach your goals, then you really probably don't want to reach your goals, because that is one of the fastest ways to learn anything in any area of your life. Okay, I digress. So into the episode. So let's talk about writing a new story. Now, when I say writing a new story, what do I mean? I mean changing the story you tell yourself on a daily basis that is currently producing the results you're getting in every area of life. The story that we tell ourselves forms what is called a worldview, or another term for this is our paradigm, and it's basically the blueprint in your brain through which you operate in the world. Now, that sounds a little bit, I don't know, it sounds a little bit woo-woo, like, blueprint in my brain. But here's the deal. The only difference between someone that's getting phenomenal results in the area that you are looking to get phenomenal results in is the information they're operating on, and that really comes down to, at the very, very, very base level, if you've not listened to episode 1, talk about thoughts, feelings, actions, results, your thoughts are ultimately controlled by your beliefs, and you can reshape those. But if you've not listened to that, go back and listen to episode 1. That'll give you more context here. But when I talk about the blueprint through which your brain is basically operating on, the way you see the world, that's determining your results, that is called a paradigm. And paradigms are formed by the stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over and over again. So imagine this. There's something in your brain called a neural pathway. This is a real thing. It's called a neural pathway, and it's basically a small groove in your brain. And this is one of the reasons that people say, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We've all heard this stupid thing. We've all heard people say, well, I'm too old to learn blah, 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 or I'm this age, so I can't, if I was younger, if I could change things, if I was this, if I was that. So it's a bunch of baloney. You can teach an old dog new tricks. They've done studies on this. It's called neuroplasticity, meaning the ability of your brain to have plastic, meaning moldable tendencies, continues throughout your life. Now, it's easier when you're younger. That's why little kids can pick up on 1, 2, 3 languages. They can learn things so quickly. It's extremely easy when you're younger. It does become a little bit harder when you're older, but nevertheless, it still can be changed. Now, a neural pathway is a groove in your brain that happens from the same exact thought going over and over and over and over again. Now, there's something in your brain known as a neural pathway. Now, I mentioned that, but neural pathways are made up of neurons, and neurons are nerve cells that send messages all over the body to allow you to do everything from thinking to breathing to walking to talking to eating. Everything you do is controlled by neurons. And when you think a thought consistently, repeatedly, over and over and over again, just like muscle memory, if you were of some specific sport in high school, even though you haven't played that sport in years possibly, if I had you go back on the field and start playing lacrosse or football or soccer or basketball, it might take you a little bit to kind of get some of the rust off the gears, so to speak, but eventually you would have muscle memory of certain activities that you've done thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and your brain is the same way, wired together, fired together, so it's just like muscle memory. So the more often that I tell myself a specific story, so to speak, or think a certain thought, the more often that I do that, there's actually something known as wired together, fired together, basically the more often that I do that, those neurons are essentially being strengthened. So the more that I do the same thing, they are becoming thicker and denser because they're working together all the time, over and over and over and over again. Now, going back to neural pathways, what does this have to do with the groove in my brain, the rut in my brain? Well, here's what it has to do with. I want you to picture this. The first time I have a thought, the first time I begin to tell myself a new story, meaning I am because blank, or I can or I can't because blank, and my brain goes from asking, well, where's the evidence to support this statement? Well, I am this because of, and now my brain's going to go look for evidence to support that. Again, if you have not listened to episode 1, go back and listen to that, pause this, come back to this after you've heard that. But I am blank because of blank. I can do this because of blank. I can't do this because of blank. Now, if I tell myself something often enough, it does not matter if it's true or not. It does not matter at all. My brain knows that if it's given commands, it's going to carry those commands out. If I give it that command often enough, over and over and over and over again, my conscious mind feeds that to my subconscious mind. Eventually, there's a neural pathway in my brain. There's a rut. There's a groove from these neurons firing together over and over and over and over again, and my brain begins to do that automatically, which is how we actually come about with habits. But I want you to think about this. The best analogy that I can give you for neural pathways is this right here. Think about the first time I think a new thought. I want you to picture just an abandoned field, like, for example, maybe across the street from like a Dollar General. Little side note here. If you look at Dollar Generals, 9 times out of 10, if you see a Dollar General right across the street, there is some form of an abandoned field. I don't know what it is. It's almost always spot on, though. 90% of the time, Dollar General directly across the street, abandoned field. Not sure if that's in their marketing plan or what. I don't know, but it's pretty accurate. Anyway, moving on. So if you think a brand new thought, I want you to picture just an abandoned field, an empty field. There's nothing there. There's no tire tracks. There's no road. There's nothing. First time you think that thought, it's like walking through that field or riding a bike through that field or driving a car through that field. You're going to leave a small set of tracks, but give it a couple days, it'll go away. Now, if I do that every single day, over and over and over and over again, once a day, twice a day, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times a day, if I do that over and over and over again, now that field eventually becomes, the grass gets smashed down, some of it dies. Now I've got a 2-track, there's 2 dirt strips of tire track and there's grass in the middle. And then eventually that becomes a dirt road and then a gravel road. And then if I keep traveling that over and over and over and over again, that road might get chipped and sealed or paved. And then it might become a 2-lane road. Then it might become a highway. Then it might end up being the 405 in California, which is, like 6 or 8 lanes wide and there's thousands of cars on it at the same time. It all started, though, with that abandoned field with one trip through, and you could tell just barely that someone had been there. Our thoughts are the same way. If I want to change the story that I have of myself, meaning the worldview that I have of myself, the thing that I operate within, the reasons that I have the results that I have are due to the blueprint in my brain, my paradigm. The thing that is controlling my life is due to the stories that I've told myself, the thoughts that I have repeatedly thought over and over and over and over and over again. And the beauty of being a human is that I can change that. Animals have no rationale. People want to say, we're all animals, we're human animals, and we're just different breeds and blah, blah, blah. And there's the Disney song that you are a human animal. No, that's not the case. We're not animals. We've been given rationale. We have the highest mental faculties of any living creature on Earth. Yes, there are things with bigger brains. Yes, there are elephants. I don't care, but we have rationale. We can actually make decisions, deductions. We can think, okay, so if A equals B, then B is non-A, and that, okay, like we can actually make rational decisions. And because of that, we can think thoughts repeatedly, or we can think them once and throw them away. Now, I want to pause here. I want to read an excerpt from The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And he says this. He says, every day you wake up, we face the same universal challenge: to overcome mediocrity and live to our full potential. It's the greatest challenge in human history: to rise above our excuses, do what's right, give our best, and create the level 10 life we truly want. The one with no limits, the one so few people ever get to live. He goes on to say, unfortunately, most people never even come close. Approximately 95% of our society settles for far less than they want in life, wishing they had more, living with regret, and never understanding that they could be, do, and have all they want. According to the Social Security Administration, and this is, again, going back to what I talked about in your teacher's Never told you this because they didn't know that episode. This goes back to that, and this stat has been true since World War II, but he says this. He says, according to the Social Security Administration, if you take any 100 people at the start of their working careers and follow them for the next 40 years until they are at retirement age, until they reach retirement age, here's what you will find. Only 1% will be wealthy. 4 will be financially secure. 5 will continue working not because they want to, but because they have to. 36 will be dead. And 54 will be broke and dependent on friends, family, and relatives and the government to take care of them. Monetarily speaking, that's only 5% of us who will be successful in creating a life of freedom, and 95% who will continue to struggle their entire lives. Now, again, going back to the name of the show, 5% Radio. That is why I named the show what I did. Moving on, he says, so the crucial question, the one that we must explore to find the answer to, is this. What can we do now to ensure we don't end up struggling like the 95% majority will? Then he goes on to say this. He says, research shows that on any given day, the average person thinks somewhere between 50,000 and 60,000 thoughts. The problem is that 95% of our thoughts are the same ones we thought the day before. Again, the story we tell ourselves. And then he says, and the day before that, and the day before that. It's no wonder most people go through life day after day, month after month, year after year, and never change the quality of their lives. Like old worn baggage, we carry stress, fear, and worry from yesterday with us into today. When presented with opportunities, we quickly check our rearview mirror to assess our past capabilities. No, I've never done anything like that before. I've never achieved at that level. In fact, I've failed time and time again. Now, that is a story that you tell yourself, and he refers to that as RMS, Rearview Mirror Syndrome. RMS, Rearview Mirror Syndrome, basically meaning I can because you're looking back for evidence. I can't because I am that kind of person. I am not that kind of person. You're telling yourself a story that is not true. It's not actually set in stone, but because you've told yourself this story so much, and those neurons wired together, fired together, they fired over and over and over, and you've driven through that thought field in your mind repeatedly over and over and over and over again, and you've lived this thoughts, feelings, actions, results loop over and over, and you've told yourself the same story for days, months, weeks, years, decades maybe for some of you. And you've told yourself the story so much that you now believe it. Again, if Albert Einstein woke up every single day and his mother walked into his bedroom and said, "Hi, son, you're the dumbest child on earth," for a while he'd be like, "Oh, that's not true." Then eventually he'd be like, maybe there's something to that. Eventually he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm not that intelligent." And then eventually he would tell you, it would come out of his mouth. He would verbalize, "No, I'm the dumbest kid on earth." And well, why is that? And someday down the road, he wouldn't even be able to point back to, well, my mom told me that every day. He would just adopt that as his own belief. He would hear it so much that he would say, you know what? I'm just not that intelligent. And you hear people tell these stupid, disempowering stories about their lives that they don't even want, but they will tell you the same thing because they have heard it and they have told it to themselves over and over and over and over again. I've had so many people that I get around and they tell this story. They verbalize their thoughts. The Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And people will verbalize, well, I'm not that intelligent. I'm not this. I've never really been that attractive. I've never been that smart. I would have done that, but I'm just not intelligent. They'll tell you the story. They don't even want the result they're having. They don't even enjoy the story, but they've told it so often that they believe it. And if you want to change your story, you've got to start with changing what you tell yourself daily. You've got to begin observing the thoughts you tell yourself every single day in every single area. Hal Elrod in the book, The Miracle Morning, talked about this. He said, always remember that who you are is a result of who you were. But where you go depends entirely on who you choose to be from this moment on. I heard another person put it this way. He said, we're not human beings. We are human becomings. A being is, I've arrived. I've solidified. I'm a human being. This is the way I am. Versus a human becoming, the way he put it. Kind of a weird thought, but track with me here. The way he was meaning it is, I am becoming something new every single day based on what I choose to do with my life. So going back to the field, the dirt road, the gravel, the 2-track, the highway, the superhighway, the 405, your brain is going to take orders from you. There's another book called The Ant and the Elephant by Vince Pacente, and he talks about the idea of your conscious brain, meaning When you think a thought, 2,000 neurons are stimulated. When I think a thought, 2,000 neurons in my brain, like when I think, oh, I'm going to pick up my phone and send this text message, 2,000 neurons are stimulated. It's the equivalent of an ant versus 4 billion, billion with a B, 4 billion neurons are stimulated when I focus on my subconscious mind, when I visualize, when I'm daydreaming. You know, your teacher scolded you going, don't be daydreaming. And Ray Kroc growing up, his parents, the guy that made McDonald's what it is today, his parents, his mom and dad would call him Danny Daydreamer. His classmates would pick on him, Danny Daydreamer, and he would be sitting there thinking, visualizing, just dreaming as a kid. And his mom would say, "What are you doing, Ray?" And he would say, "Nothing. I'm just thinking." And they picked on him. They called him Danny Daydreamer. Guess what that guy did? He was stimulating the 4 billion neurons. He was creating a new story. He was writing a new picture, a new script in his brain, a new blueprint by visualizing over and over. And even as a kid, he probably did not understand what he was doing, but he was visualizing, he was daydreaming over and over and over and over again. Walt Disney, when he was dying on his deathbed, someone told his wife, man, if Walt could see Disneyland for what it is now. And she said it never would have become something if he hadn't seen it first, meaning he saw it in his mind first. He visualized it first. He was having that elephant, those 4 billion neurons working, charging, running every single day, visualizing what's this going to be like, telling a new story. He wasn't caught up in the 2,000 neurons of, well, you know, how thick should we lay the concrete in the park? And do you think we should put the poles down 6 feet, or do you think 4.5 feet? And he wasn't focused on that kind of stuff. He was focused on the big picture. Let someone else take care of the ant details, the 2,000 neurons. I'm focused on the story that I'm telling myself about where I want to go. And this is why it's been said that every single action we are casting a vote by every single action that we make. We're casting a vote for who we want to be, the future version of yourself, who you want to be, who you want to become. Every single action casts that vote, because I can go in the direction that my ant is going, my 2,000 neurons, the thinking that I currently have. Or I can tap into that elephant. I can focus on my subconscious mind. I can visualize. I can tell a new story to myself and imagine what would that be like to be a different person. Another excerpt from the Miracle Morning, he says this. He says, we must realize that the real impact and consequences of each of our choices and actions, and even our thoughts, is monumental, because every single thought, choice, and action is determining who we are becoming, which will ultimately determine the quality of our lives. As T. Harv Eker said in his best-selling book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, how you do anything is how you do everything. Every time you choose to do the easy thing instead of the right thing, you are shaping your identity, becoming the type of person who does what's easy rather than what's right. You've got to be careful every single decision that you make. I can stay in my ant. I can stay in the story that I currently know. I can stay just thinking with my regular brain, just thinking, you know, a simple thought, well, I do this because I'm this, or I can focus on that elephant. I can focus on visualizing who I want to be, rewriting the story, regardless of what's happened in the past, regardless of my family, regardless of what my IQ was, regardless of a test result, regardless of what my family has done or has not done in the past, regardless of what people have told me. I can write my new story. Pick up the pen and write your story today of what you want to do with your life. Thoughts are things. Thoughts are things. Okay, why when you walk into one person's house, there's just this negative, and I'm not one of these feng shui and zen and you got to be aligned with I'm not one of those weird, wacky people at all. Like you're not going to walk into my house and see me burning incense and chant. Like stuff's weird. It is. But there's a reason you can walk into a person's house, and regardless of their beliefs, I'm a Christian. I've walked into Christians' homes that I felt very, I don't know how else to say it, very negative, just like life-sucking, just depressive energy. And I've walked into other people's houses, Christian, non-Christian, and their house, I just had immediate peace. The thoughts that were in their home, the paradigm of that family was joyful. It was uplifting. It was high energy. It was good. So you can hang out with someone and you're like, man, I just feel like the life was sucked out of me. There's some people whose houses I go to, and every time I'm in their house, I'm like, man, I'm ready to take a nap, pass out. I've got no energy. It just feels like the life was sucked out of me when I walked in the door. And there's other places I go, and I'm like, man, I feel great. I feel so at home. I feel so welcome. I feel so just the energy's good here. I don't know how to explain that, but thoughts have a presence. It's why you can be talking to someone and you can't put your finger on it, but you're like, I'm just not comfortable when I'm around that person. Thoughts have a presence. And if I want to change my life, then I have to start with changing my thoughts. I have to start with telling myself a new story. I want you to think about this, and I'm coming to a close here, but if you had a little kid, I've got a little 13, soon to be 14-month-old little guy. 6 days from now, he'll be 14 months, and he's a blast. I want the best for that kid. I'm not going to ever tell him a story of, well, son, we're going to homeschool you, so you probably won't be afforded the same opportunities as the other kids. And I don't want you to really dream too big because I don't want you to be let down. I mean, you're more than likely going to be extremely short. I'm 5'3.5". My wife is 5 foot tall. You're probably going to be really short. So don't try too hard in sports because that's probably not going to really help you out. And just so you know, no one in my family really has ever. We've never done such and such, so I don't want you to I don't want you to dream too big because then you'll be let down. I just want you to, live a mediocre life, just try to get a good job. Just, if you want to kind of float through school, get some C's and B's, maybe a couple A's, we'll be proud of you. And if you want to go to college, that's fine. Just try to live an average life. Don't try too hard because if you jump too high, you're going to have to fall really far if you don't make it. And I wouldn't want you to miss your goal. No, I would never do that to my kid, but we do that to ourselves. If I came into your life and talked to you like you talk to yourself every single day, oh, you look fat, you're out of shape, you're terrible, you're so stupid, you're such an idiot, why'd you say that? I can't believe you did that today at work, you're such a buffoon, man, they should fire you, I wouldn't hire you, you're worthless, man, you're a terrible spouse, you're a terrible husband, if I talk to you like that, the way you talk to yourself, if I talked to you like that, you'd either punch me in the face or just tell me shut up and probably never have me over again if I was one of your friends. But you'll talk to yourself that way. You'll tell yourself stories that if anyone else told you that, you'd punch them in the nose. But you'll listen to it from yourself. You'll tell yourself that story, and because you tell yourself that story often enough, repeated enough, long enough, it becomes true. One other excerpt from the Miracle Morning, he says this. He says, always remember that who you are becoming is far more important than what you're doing, and yet it is what you're doing that is determining who you are becoming. And this goes into really the topic of Miracle Morning, but I just started going through this book, and I had a morning routine going on, and this was actually probably the peak of my I'm going to say consistency, just how I felt, my rest, my energy, just everything felt phenomenal. My goals, I was on track, just everything was falling into place. This was before we had Elijah, before we had our little guy, and I was able to go to bed when I wanted to and wake up when I wanted to. Actually, it's crazy. Being woken up by my wristband vibrating versus a child crying, it was a totally different world. I'm like, man, I can go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, 7 days a week. This is phenomenal. And then we have a little guy, and he's totally worth the disruption of sleep, but just, seasons change. They come to an end, new ones start. So I was doing the same exact morning routine every single morning. I would wake up, and I would do gratitude. I would read through some goals. I would read through the statement of the type of person that I want to be, and then the activities that person would do. I would spend time in my Bible. I would pray. I would read a book. I would look at my goals, and then I would make a list of what do I have to do today. Then I would organize that list in order of importance based on what's going to get the most impact, what needs done first, and then I would start my day. And I was doing this every single day, 7 days a week. I'd wake up at the same exact time. I'd do the same exact routine. I'd sit in the same spot. I would do, before all that started, I would just do meditation, which for me is not anything woo-woo or weird. I literally just focus on breathing, and I listen to quiet instrumental music for anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, depending on how the morning started, just to completely calm my brain. Just because you wake up, there's a million things on your mind. And I would start each and every single day with that same exact routine. And I've begun to do that again. Now, today is only day 3, but I can tell you that I'm kicking myself for all the days that I got out of a morning routine. Even if I was waking up early still, not doing a morning routine, you're basically walking into the fist of life, getting punched in the face by the day, rather than waking up and having a good hour to yourself. Well, I have kids, I can't do. Tell yourself a new story. Wake up earlier. Well, I'm not a morning person. Tell yourself a new story. You're not a morning person because you told yourself you're not a morning person. If you decide that you're going to be a morning person and you tell yourself that often enough and you lay down and you're like, man, I cannot wait to wake up tomorrow. 7 hours of sleep is the exact amount of sleep that I need to feel absolutely energized and just filled to start my next day. I cannot wait to wake up tomorrow, do my morning routine. If you tell yourself a new story often enough, it will become the truth. But you've got to choose to tell the story. You've got to choose to switch gears from what you're currently doing to telling yourself a new story, to getting a new result. Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Again, listen to episode 1. Now, to wrap this up, to illustrate the power of stories, let's talk about Albert Einstein once again. Albert Einstein was actually sent home when he was a kid with a note that he was to give to his mother. And the note basically was sending him home because your child is too dumb for us to teach and our teachers can't work with him. He's too, his intelligence is too low and blah, blah, blah. And his mother gets the note. And as she's reading the note, she's sitting there again, going back to, would you tell your kid that awful story? She's sitting there holding this note in her hands, and her precious baby boy has just been sent home by the teachers that want her to believe that your son is unintelligent. That's why we can't teach him. And his mother takes the note. She reads the note out loud to Albert, and basically something along the lines of this. Your son is too intelligent. Our teachers can't handle him. That basically they don't even know what to do with him. He's so smart. We're going to have you take him home. And essentially what would have been an earlier version of homeschooling, we're going to have you homeschool him on your own because he's so smart that our teachers can't even teach him. That was the story that she told her little boy. Now, he was probably, he would have been identified as ADD and ADHD nowadays because he was high energy, probably bored out of his little mind, sitting in school, learning all this stuff. And he's thinking, okay, like this is the easiest thing in the world. Like I don't want to be here. And he gets in trouble. He gets sent home. The teachers want the mom to believe that their issue is not that he is bored, but that he's dumb. But his mom chooses to tell a different story. And now we have Albert Einstein. Now, had she told him that story as a kid, hey, you're unintelligent, you're dumb, the teachers can't handle you because you have such a low IQ, they don't even know what to do, you're so unintelligent, doggone it, son, why don't you just focus in school? Why couldn't you be more like the other kids? She could have told him that story, but she told him a different story, and because of that, he went on to become who we know today is a universal yes when you speak of intelligence and you mention Albert Einstein. So be careful of the story that you tell yourself. I'm going to do an entire episode on morning routines and day end caps and things like that here in the coming future, but be careful of the story you tell yourself. If you want to tell yourself a new story, look for new evidence that would support that. If you want to tell yourself about how you can succeed at something, look for evidence. Again, episode 1, look for evidence of that being true, not evidence of it not being true. I could look at my goals and say, well, I achieved a 3rd-degree black belt at this age, and I was number 1 in the office for sales for this, and I did great with this, and I sold this much of this, and I can remember when a counselor told me that I was high-functioning, meaning that I'm extremely intelligent, and I can remember this, and I can remember that, and I can remember, getting out of debt. I can go relive all of these different things. I can walk past the trophy case of my life, and I can look at the things that support in a positive way why I could be successful. Or I could say, hey, I've got this goal, and I could go back to the failures in my life and say, well, I don't know, man. I mean, you were homeschooled K through 12. You dropped out of college once in the middle of a semester. You dropped out of university after one semester. You've had 24 jobs. I mean, you were a shy kid. You're 5'3". You didn't really have that many friends growing up. You weren't really that good with people, and you probably sales probably isn't something you should do because you've quit 24 jobs before, and no one in your family's ever been an entrepreneur, and no one in your family's ever made $1 million a year, and you should probably settle for, and don't try to achieve. I could tell myself that story, or I could tell myself the reliving my trophy case and looking at the things that I've done that support the fact that I can do what I want to do. Only you, I feel like Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent wildfires. Only you can determine the story that you tell yourself. And the good news is you're the only person that matters in that story. And you can choose to pick up the pen, write a new story every single day, starting with today.